What does it take to silence a room full of strangers who think they know you? James Carter stood in line at First National Bank, his weathered hands clutching a crumpled deposit slip. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the polished marble floors. At 58, James carried the weight of 2 wars in his broad shoulders, his left ear deaf from a grenade blast in Iraq, his right barely picking up muffled sounds. He relied on lip reading and a hearing aid that buzzed like a trapped fly when the room got too loud. Today, the bank was a cacophony, tellers tapping keyboards, customers murmuring, a toddler wailing in the corner. James adjusted his hearing aid, trying to focus, but the noise was a relentless assault. He'd come to deposit his monthly VA check, a ritual he'd performed for years. The routine was simple: hand over the slip, nod politely, and leave. But today felt different. The line moved sluggishly, and James sensed eyes on him, judgmental, impatient. He glanced at the man behind him, a young guy in a pressed suit, tapping his foot and muttering under his breath. "Hurry up, old man," the suit hissed, loud enough for others to hear. A few people snickered. James's jaw tightened, but he kept his gaze forward, his military discipline holding firm. When he finally reached the counter, the teller woman with a tight bun and a name tag reading, Karen, barely looked up. "Speak clearly," she snapped, her voice cutting through the din. James leaned in, reading her lips, and explained he needed to deposit his check. His words came out slow, deliberate, his speech slightly slurred from years of compensating for his hearing loss. Karen rolled her eyes. "I don't have all day," she said, loud enough for the line to hear. More laughter rippled behind him. The suit muttered, "Great, now we're stuck with this guy." James's hands trembled, not from fear but from a rising tide of frustration. He'd faced worse bullets, bombs, the screams of comrades, but this was different. This was humiliation in a place he'd once defended, a place where he should have been just another customer. He took a deep breath, his training kicking in: assess, adapt, overcome. He handed over the check, but Karen tossed it back. "This is outdated. You need to fill out a new form," she said, pointing to a stack of papers. Her tone was sharp, almost gleeful, as if she enjoyed his struggle. The room seemed to close in, the laughter and whispers growing louder. James felt the weight of every stare, every smirk. He wanted to walk away, to disappear into the quiet of his small apartment, but something held him there. A spark of defiance, born in the deserts of Fallujah, flickered to life. He wasn't just a veteran with a disability, he was a man who'd carried his squad through hell, who'd saved lives, who'd never backed down. As he reached for a new form, a voice cut through the noise. "Hey, buddy, maybe you should just go home and let the rest of us get on with our day." It was the suit, now openly mocking him, his arms crossed, a smug grin plastered across his face. The crowd's laughter swelled, and Karen smirked, not bothering to hide it. James froze, the form crumpling in his hand. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman stepped forward from the line, her presence commanding despite her small frame. She was in her 30s, with a no-nonsense ponytail and a name tag pinned to her blazer. Lila, a bank manager who'd been observing from the side. Her eyes burned with a quiet intensity as she addressed the room. "Enough," she said, her voice steady but firm. The laughter died instantly. Lila turned to Karen. "You're done for the day. We'll talk later." Karen's face flushed, and she slunk away from the counter. Lila approached James, her expression softening. "Sir, I'm sorry. Let me help you." She took the crumpled form from his hand, smoothing it out with care. The room was silent now, every eye on them. James nodded, his throat tight, and handed her the check. As Lila processed it, she spoke softly, just for him. My dad was a veteran. Lost his leg in Vietnam. He used to say people only see what's broken, not what's strong. Her words hit James like a lifeline. He hadn't expected kindness, not here, not now. But Lila wasn't done. She turned to the suit, who was shifting uncomfortably. You, she said, her voice sharp again. You think it's funny to mock a man who served this country? A man who probably saved lives while you were learning to tie your fancy shoes? The suit's smirk vanished, his face paling. The room was a vacuum, every breath held. Lila finished James's deposit, handing him the receipt with a smile. Thank you for your service, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But James wasn't finished. He turned to face the crowd, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I lost my hearing fighting for people like you, he said, his eyes locking on the suit. I'd do it again. But next time you laugh, remember what it costs. The silence was deafening. The suit stared at the floor, unable to meet James's gaze. The crowd shifted, some looking away, others nodding with newfound respect. James took his receipt and walked toward the door, his head high. But before he left, he paused and looked back at Lila. Your dad, he said quietly. He'd be proud. Lila's eyes glistened, and she nodded. As James stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the moment lingered. He'd silenced the room not with anger, but with the quiet power of his truth. Back at home, James sat at his kitchen table, the receipt still in his pocket. He thought of Lila's father, of the battles they'd both fought, and of the small victories that mattered most. He'd faced humiliation and walked away stronger, not because he'd shouted back, but because he'd stood his ground. And somewhere, in the silence of that bank, he'd reminded a room full of strangers that courage doesn't need a voice, it needs a heart. The next day, James returned to the bank. He didn't need to deposit anything, he just wanted to see Lila. When he walked in, the atmosphere was different. No whispers, no smirks. Karen was gone, and a new teller greeted him with a smile. Lila spotted him and approached, holding a small envelope. This is for you, she said, handing it to him. Inside was a note, from one veteran's family to another, thank you. Tucked inside was a photo of her father, a proud man in uniform, smiling despite his scars. James didn't say much, didn't need to. He nodded, tucked the note into his jacket, and left. The world outside felt a little lighter, a little kinder. And for the first time in years, he felt heard.